What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shaped their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. In the last 3 episodes, we have featured incredible military leaders. Our fourth and final guest in this series is Captain Keith Hoskins, who today is Executive Vice President of Branch Operations for the largest credit union in the world, Navy Federal. Keith grew up playing football in Parkville, Missouri, with a dream to be a Blue Angel pilot. And that dream came true. His 27 years in the Navy included serving as commanding officer for the Naval Air Station Pensacola, where he provided leadership oversight for more than 25,000 military and civilian personnel. I am so excited to dive into lessons in collaboration and character.
If I'm going to say I'm going to empower a team or a group, where does it start? It starts with the leader. If I'm going to say I'm going to empower you, it's up to me to provide you with the necessary tools, the training, the resources, the top cover, the guidance, the guardrails, all the things that you need to do your job. Once I provide that to you, then you are empowered to do your job.
Captain Hoskins, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Don.
We're going to have fun today. I love your backstory and the time that I've had getting to know you in the process of preparing for today. And I know that as a child, you and your dad loved making model airplanes and you enjoyed going to air shows. And in 1971, you're 5 years old, you're in Parkville, Missouri, and you go to an air show with your dad. And what do you remember about the show? And more importantly, what do you remember about the conversation you had with your dad after the show?
Yeah, Don, it was a hot day in Kansas City. It was in August 1971, and standing out on the tarmac on the concrete of Richard Scabauer Air Force Base, which is in the southern part of Kansas City, was a base that was just fantastic. And I loved to visit as a kid with my father. I recall standing there watching these incredibly loud airplanes fly by. They were painted up, of course, blue and gold, the official colors of the United States Navy, and the Blue Angels then were flying the F-4 Phantom, which is a 2-engine, very large aircraft. As a young child, you're amazed at not only the noise and the sound, but these formations and these fast flybys. Like every air show, you have the opportunity to walk around and talk to pilots. Of course, my father was talking to pilots, and I would just stand there next to him and listen to these conversations. And I just took it all in. The first memory that I actually have of being at an air show and watching airplanes fly that is very vivid to me. We're in my father's pickup truck. We're in traffic trying to leave after the air show. And I remember looking at my father and saying these exact words: "Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to be a Blue Angel." My dad looked at me. His response was perfect. He says, "Well, son, if you want to be a Blue Angel, you got to work hard in school and you got to stay out of trouble." That's the only advice that he gave me. And I remember it to this day. So that was a special moment with my father.
What an incredible conversation. I mean, it's short, it's perfect. And you wanted to be a Blue Angel, 5 years old. 27 years later, the dream came true. And you got to find out and call your father. Tell me about that.
That was another great day that I greatly appreciate in my career. The Blue Angels have this slot where you call in to find out if you made the team after you did your finalist interviews in Pensacola. First, I was an instructor pilot at a squadron in Jacksonville, Florida. I had to go to work that day, so I didn't want to call while being at the squadron. So I came home to be with my wife when I made the call because I didn't know which way it was going to go. So I wanted to have her there with me to either celebrate or to help me get through the pain of being rejected, of becoming a Blue Angel, my dream. I came home, made the phone call, and got the great news that I was selected. And the very first call was to my father. My father served in the United States Army for a total of 38 total years. 28 was active duty. He always wanted to be a pilot, ended up being a paratrooper. And for now, his youngest child to live out a dream that he had, and for me to be able to live out my dream, that call was very emotional. A lot of joy, tears of joy, and congratulations. And it was just very, very special. He was so proud, so proud.
When did he first get to see you fly as an angel?
So I started in 1999 as the narrator. So I narrated the show and did a lot of the VIP flights. That was my first year. Then I transitioned into the solo pilot role in 2000. And the Blue Angels do their first show in El Centro, California, which is where they do their winter training for about 3 months, about 120 training flights prior to their first demonstration. So my father had the opportunity to come there in March of 2000 to watch me fly my first Blue Angels show as the number 6 pilot, one of the solo pilots of the Blue Angels. It was, again, a great moment. One of the news agencies from Kansas City flew out and they actually did a beautiful piece on my first flight. Obviously, brought my father in for interviews. It actually ended up winning an award in one of the news agency competitions. But it was a great moment. He was very proud, very proud.
That number, you all are the best of the best. You define exceptionalism. And yet, before you do your first show, you're going to do 120 training flights before you go do your first one.
Absolutely. It's so important to get that muscle memory and to build up that trust and confidence as a team. During the time, I likened it to when I was in college or high school when I played football, we had 3-a-days because you had to get so many practices in before that first game. And it's the same concept with the Blue Angels. You got to get a lot of practice in before you have that first show.
Wow. By the way, I'm not going to call you out on age, but 3 days haven't been legal in college football in like 70 years or something like that. We're also not going to suggest that your school broke any rules, but that's good. So there's a big jump, though, between seeing a Blue Angel and being a Blue Angel. When did you start studying what it was going to take? I mean, obviously, 5 years old, you say that to your dad, but there's got to be a stage where you go, what's it going to take for me to get in that cockpit? Tell me about the journey of knowing that you want to do it and then actually making it happen.
So I joined an organization called Civil Air Patrol, and it still exists today. It's an auxiliary of the United States Air Force, and it gives young men and women the opportunity to join this organization and learn about leadership, to learn about aerodynamics and aviation and space flight. I was 13 years old.
13.
Yeah. I had a very good childhood friend of mine where he joined this organization and he said, "Why don't you come to a meeting and check it out?" I went to a meeting at the Trans World Airlines, TWA, at the Kansas City International Airport. Once again, I'm showing my age. They gave us a space where we could meet once a week. You would wear a Air Force uniform, of course, with the Civil Air Patrol insignia.
Right.
My parents were very supportive because it brought structure. There were manuals that you had to read on leadership. There were manuals that you had to read about aerodynamics, and we had to take tests before we got advanced to the next rank. Once I started to study aerodynamics and understanding how airplanes fly, I just fell more in love with aviation and actually had the opportunity to fly my first airplane when I was 13 years old.
No way.
It was eye-opening. It was very hard and very challenging, obviously 13 years old trying to fly an airplane, but I fell in love with it.
Wow. By the way, I love that when you mentioned the manuals that they're giving you at Civil Air Patrol there's aerodynamics, but there's also a manual on leadership. That's pretty neat and cool that they're investing in that piece of who you would one day become.
Absolutely. And it's funny when you look back and you think about some of the learnings and the readings of how it applies to when I was in college and when I first joined the military. And even now, some of those leadership principles still exist. They're so enduring, being a servant leader, being a selfless leader, taking care of your men and women that you're in charge of. It's very basic, fundamental leadership 101 that if you really read into it and really learn at a young age and it becomes a habit, it really helps build that foundation.
Yeah. So Blue Angels your goal, but in school, you're 13 years old, you're a freshman in high school probably. Sports is still helping to keep your attention as well, right? You talk about your parents saying that Civil Air Patrol keeping you out of trouble, but sports did as well. I read that your sport of choice was football and you played at Park Hill High School. Now, I loved going back into your high school yearbook photos. I sent a few of them to you earlier, and you were good enough to both receive an academic and athletic scholarship to play at Missouri Western State University. Can you share something about that athletic journey, high school to college, and how much football meant to you?
Football's been a part of my life since I was in the third grade. I'll even go back further, Don. So in the third grade, my father signed a waiver for me to play in a suburban football league in Kansas City. It was a fifth and sixth grade team, and I was in the third grade, and he had to sign a waiver for me to play. So I was playing with the big guys in third grade. Of course, I was on the B team, but it was fine. I got to learn a lot about the game of football, and I got really involved in the athletic part of it or the conditioning part of it, staying in shape, which I think really helped me mature and develop and understand that hard work pays off at an early age. So, just like you mentioned earlier, I did have a lot of aspirations to potentially play in the National Football League one day. And I stuck with it all the way up through high
Are
school.
you going to be a chief one day?
That's right. Be a Kansas City Chief one day. It's funny how I had two loves that were in parallel. I knew that if I had an opportunity to play college football, I had to work hard in school, but also I had to work really hard on the football field. And those are really my two priorities growing up. So the transition from high school into college, I can tell you on the academic side, I decided that if the football piece didn't work out, or I went to the next level, that I needed to have a degree to give me the best opportunity and eventually my family the best opportunity to have a sustainable job and to be able to provide for my family or serve the nation in a capacity I've always dreamed of being a pilot. So I majored in electrical engineering technology
While playing college football.
while playing college football.
I bet you there were a coach or two that probably weren't keen on that idea.
They weren't, especially when I had to sit down with, I'll never forget, I sat down with Coach Lang, who was our wide receivers coach. I had to explain to him that based on my curriculum, for me to graduate in 4.5 years, I had to take this lab that would eat into 30 minutes of practice once a week. That was a tough conversation, but they gave in and they allowed me the opportunity to do that.
So you're there, you're a wide receiver at Missouri Western. And you play the 4 years, they weren't the greatest 4 years in the history of college football, but you had to learn some amazing lessons. Tell me about the best lesson that you would use as you would move forward as a leader going through those 4 seasons.
Interdependency, having team members that relied on each other on the field and off the field. College football is just different than high school football. When you get to that level, you form the brotherhood. You always hear that term in sports, the brotherhood or the sisterhood. I think that's what I really took away from my college experience. Freshman year, when I started, there was a lot of upperclassmen that would take the reins on the leadership role and pull you up alongside of them. And they taught you about hard work in college athletics. They taught you the importance of being at team meetings 15 minutes on time. They taught you the importance of ensuring that you're making good grades and attending class because then the coaches were checking on you. And if you failed a course or if you didn't go to class, you could potentially be suspended for a certain amount of time for the team. We had very strict rules. So it really taught you responsibility and it really taught you where you fit into that big puzzle of being on a college football team, which obviously transcends into a lot of things that I did in the military and now what I do in the corporate world. It's important for individuals to think about the interdependencies and what you bring to the team. Your performance, everything that you do is so critical to the overall team success.
How did that play out amongst your teammates? Was there a particular teammate that you recall even today who was, say, particularly good at maybe holding you accountable?
Oh, absolutely. Eric Bruder, without a doubt. Eric Bruder was one of the upperclassmen, wide receivers. I call him the 1980s version of Julian Edelman. I mean, this guy was fantastic. What a great athlete. He also studied electrical engineering technology. So he was an upperclassman who knew when I was in class. He was such a great role model. He would help tutor me and mentor me about the balance between academics and athletics. Just a great friend. We still stay in touch to this day, not every day, but we still stay in touch to this day.
That's awesome. Well, there's the interdependence, right? We still have that relationship. You know, while you were at Missouri Western, you guys went through a coaching change. Your first coach, Rob Hicklin, was then replaced by a guy named Dennis Darnell. Now, the two coaches had very different coaching styles. What do you recall about each of their styles?
I've got to talk about Coach Rob Hicklin. I consider him a father figure. He recruited my brother Tim 6 years prior to me going to Missouri Western. So I knew of Coach Hicklin prior to being recruited. He was very calm, very passionate in his coaching. I take a look at a lot of coaches today and their passion for the game and their players, and their passion for the success of their players, not only on the field, but off the field, and developing young men to be leaders outside of football as well. Coach Rob Hicklin was that. He was the epitome of what I would call the coach that looked out for all elements of the development of a football player on and off the field. It's not all about just winning the game
Performance.
and performance. There were other elements that he focused on as a coach. That's what I really learned from a leadership perspective. And I just really thank him for that. You know, he provided that leadership, that coaching aura for my first 2 years.
Right.
Then, as you indicated, Coach Darnell came aboard. He brought 17 years of experience when he came to Missouri Western in 1986. I believe it was his first head coaching position. So Coach Darnell, he wanted to prove a point. He was definitely that coach and leader, and you knew who the boss was every single day. He drove hard in terms of your workouts, your performance on the field, during the games, when you came off, if you did something wrong on the field, you know, for me, if I dropped a pass or did the wrong read on a route, even as the head coach, he'd let me know about it. He was very much the coach, and he would let everybody know that he was the head coach. Very passionate, but hard, which was great. That was his coaching style. And we performed under that pressure. He was very faith-based as well. That fit into my model, which was great. He brought that every single day. And I appreciated that. And that's what I really learned from Coach Darnell. So, yeah, you're right. Two different styles. But I can tell you from Coach Hicklin, it's the big picture and being a leader and taking in the big picture. And from Coach Darnell, there's that time as a leader where you need to drive people, you need to push people hard, and you need to hold them accountable.
I love it. That's one of my favorite parts about digging into people who have grown into leaders today is to look at who they modeled themselves after along the way. I mean, obviously, with Coach Hicklin, you learned that idea about how to care for your employees outside of the office today, right? I mean, how do you worry about them as hurricanes come toward Pensacola or whatever it is? You can't just worry about how quickly we're going to open back up. You have to worry about them, their families, their safety, their security.
Right.
That's beautiful. That's important. You know, I had the honor of listening to a Veterans Day panel discussion in which you shared that as you graduated from Missouri Western, because of some of those experiences, you knew what trust and confidence was, but then you joined the Navy and it enhanced your ability to trust your teammates. Tell me about the decisions to join the Navy,
During that time, that was part of Civil Air Patrol.
right?
The F-15 Eagle, which was the premier fighter, came out, and it was built in St. Louis, right across the state from Kansas City. Set a lot of speed records and climb records. And I said, you know what? That's the airplane I'm going to fly. Soon after that, I went to an air show again, much older. So now I can have conversations with pilots. And I remember having a conversation with a Marine Corps Harrier pilot. And Marines, this guy was 6 foot, about 190 pounds, chiseled, should have played in the NFL. And I remember a conversation with this gentleman, and I was so inspired by just his fortitude and his leadership and his poise of being a Marine. And I says, you know what? I'm going to be a Marine. Came home and told my dad, I'm going to be a Marine. Actually tried to get into the Marine Corps while I was in college, but that's when they were doing a lot of cuts in the service. So I never made it into the Marine Corps. And then, of course, the movie Top Gun comes out in 1986. Yes, I actually went out and bought a Kawasaki Ninja.
You are Tom Cruise, baby. I see you as Tom Cruise.
So I actually went out, got a motorcycle, looked just like Tom Cruise, had a leather jacket and everything. And then I started learning more about the Navy and landing on aircraft carriers and the challenges of landing on aircraft carriers. And hey, truth be told, Don, I love a challenge. The Navy is where I need to be. It's hard. They don't accept a lot of people into the Navy. Naval aviation is tough. That's what I want to do because that just looks very challenging. So went down to the recruiting office, signed up. The rest is history. I was accepted and started aviation officer candidate school in May of 1989 and got commissioned later that year. And probably one of the best decisions I've ever made.
That's Tom Cruise, man. That same panel discussion, there was an acronym that came up. It stood out when I listened to you talk about your leadership philosophy. ACCE was the acronym. Would you share that acronym, its development, and what those letters and words mean to you?
ACE, accountability, compartmentalization, collaboration, and empowerment. The first command that I had in the Navy was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 15, and that was in Virginia Beach, Virginia. When I took command, I wanted to ensure that my leadership philosophy was spread across the organization. And as a leader, I would be the model of my philosophy so that we can improve operational effectiveness and our tactical acumen and our performance in a lot of the combat missions, the role sets that we were given, because we were getting ready to go on a deployment during the global war on terrorism and when we were doing operations in Afghanistan. So I came up with this ACE principle. When I formulated this, I had to start with myself. The A, accountability, it simply means you have to be accountable to yourself before you're accountable to others. So every single day when you look in the mirror and when you prepare to execute your duties, whatever role that you're in, it starts with you. It's so important that it starts with the leader because you're a model. Everyone's eyes are upon you and they model your behavior. And it's really important to show that accountability to your team. The first C, compartmentalization. When you fly fighter jets, we have this term compartmentalization. It's when you're flying fast and you're doing maneuvers, you just have to focus on what you're doing. It's all about compartmentalization. Whatever's happening outside of the airplane, whatever happening with you personally, you have to put that by the wayside and you have to focus on flying that aircraft. That's when I came up with compartmentalization. It's like everything that you do, you have to give it 100%. You have to focus on that task because there's so many things today in the periphery that it kind of muddies the water. And there's so many unimportant things that I think that we could focus on that distract us from staying on task.
Isn't that the truth?
Absolutely. So that's why I say, compartmentalization. And then I thought, well, you don't want to focus so much that you have the blinders up and you're not bringing other people into the conversation. Again, part of that team. How do you bring the team, a diversity of thought? How do you bring different views on a certain process or a project that you're working on? So that's when I came up with the second C of collaboration. Collaboration is such a strong tool. Here at Navy Federal Credit Union, we use it a lot. I mean, we collaborate across the entire organization to optimize the things that we do to better support our members. And then last and finally, the E, empowerment. Empowerment is a buzzword. In all businesses, we all have buzzwords that we say today. When I think about empowerment, I thought, if I'm going to say I'm going to empower a team or a group, or in this case, a whole squadron or a company, what does that really mean? And where does it start to empower people? It starts with the leader. If I'm going to say I'm going to empower you, it's up to me to provide you with the necessary tools, the training, the resources, the top cover, the guidance, the guardrails, all the things that you need to do your job. Once I provide that to you, then you are empowered to do your job. That's my ACE principle. And I've taken that from 2007 and I still use that to this very day.
I love it. And the one that really stood out to me when I heard you say it, when I just heard you dig even deeper into it, was compartmentalization. In many places that's a negative, right? People
Yeah.
talk about that. Oh man, that's bad. Compartmentalization means you're hiding your true self. Not always. The truth is, there are windows and periods of time when you just need to be locked. And there is so much noise in the world that can affect us. But then, secondly, that empowerment piece is that whole concept about how if you can create empowerment, people can bring you bad news, which, we have a phrase in our little company: bad news doesn't get better with time, right?
So true.
And
So true.
and unfortunately, too many people think, oh, I'm just not going to mention this and maybe tomorrow it'll be better. Well, no, generally not. So, yes, empowerment allows those conversations to happen more quickly. Solutions come along with that.
Right.
So, I'm fascinated by the Blue Angels, in my opinion, maybe the greatest high performance organization of all time. Talk to me a little bit about that journey.
Whenever you read about the Blue Angels, there's a pamphlet that goes out or a manual, or you'll read an article and it talks about the Blue Angels, and you'll always hear pride and professionalism and precision. And you're like, okay, I get it. Then you become an actual team member. And here was the big aha moment for me. I remember sitting in my first debrief. For the first 10 minutes of the debrief, number 4, who is the slot pilot, usually takes control of when all 6 are flying together in a Delta, but also at the very beginning, when you're doing the walk down and you salute your crew chief and then you peel off and get into your airplane and you put the canopies down together. That's part of the ground show of the Blue Angels. For the first 15 minutes of the debrief, number 4 was nitpicking on the salutes and the precision of the salutes and the canopies going down. They're not even in the air yet. And they're talking about the precision of each step that each pilot was taking together, the salutes and the crispness and the timing of the salute. We're all meant to salute together, up and then down together. The canopies, inch by inch, frame by frame. Right then, I realized, what did I just get myself involved in here? It's 15 minutes of the debrief and they're not even airborne. And not to mention the debriefs and the conversations that occur during the actual flight portion. But, a normal flight would be 40 minutes. The debrief would last 2 hours. And everything is nitpicked because it's all about getting better. It's all about being brutally honest about where you were in the formation. What was your timing? Did you talk at the right time? Did you turn the smoke on and off at the right time? Your aileron rolls, were they precise? Were they 360 degrees or were they 350 degrees? That was the big aha moments. Is you just don't read that in a pamphlet. They live it and you learn to adhere to that type of standard.
Wow. So that's the debrief, and that's powerful. I mean, gosh, what a great story. I love that. I mean, I can only imagine what an eye opener that had to be. Take us to the air. When you're at that speed flying, do you ever get comfortable?
No, I would call it a sensory overload with calmness because there's so many things that are going on, but you have to remain calm. You have to know which radio to talk on. There's different checkpoints that you have to fly, not to mention some of the turbulence that you may feel when you're being bounced around. It's just a constant scan and constant evaluation of where you are in the formation and where you need to have an input into your stick or your throttle to maintain position. For me as a solo pilot, it was all about the precision of how far apart you were when you did those opposing maneuvers. Just imagine 2 airplanes coming at each other, 400 miles per hour each. So combined closure rate greater than the speed of sound, 800 miles per hour. And ensuring that based on the maneuver that you were doing, you had to be either 50 feet or 100 feet or 200 feet apart, and you had to control your roll rates and your G rates. That's the pull of gravity to ensure that, to be quite frank, so you didn't hit each other. Okay. Just learning that you had to be on your game every single flight, and you had to learn and get better every single flight.
Sensory overload with calmness on your game every single flight. How do you use that today at Navy Federal?
Great question. Our members are a mission. Being in the military, everybody knew their mission, right? Defend the Constitution of the United States. And I love that about the military. But now that I'm at Navy Federal, everybody understands our mission. Our members are the mission. I have the opportunity to be that leader of all of our business units here to ensure that they get the necessary tools to operate effectively in serving our members. To be able to bring what I've learned in the military as it relates to commitment, to leadership and precision, and being the pride and professionalism and all those ethos and values in the military, it exists here at Navy Federal. And it's such a good lateral transfer for me to come here. But in order to be still part of the military, because the military obviously is our membership and we serve those that serve us, it just allows me every single day to bring that passion.
I love it. The premise of this podcast is that the numbers show that a disproportionate percentage of Fortune 500 executives came from the world of sports, right? They had an active engagement, high school, collegiate level, and that experience helped shape the way they lead today. Do you agree that your time, your work in sports made you a better leader? And if so, maybe share with us a little of how and how you would counsel some of those who are growing up today and raising young athletes to capture and value the leadership lessons they're learning on the sports fields.
Like I said earlier, the interdependence piece and knowing your role and responsibility on a team. And as you ascend in that team and become a leader, you become a model. My senior year, being a captain of the football team there, Missouri Western, I had to hold a certain level of responsibility and I had to show the fact that I was a leader in that organization by my conduct and by my actions. So I think today, so many young athletes have exposure to a varying degree of athletes across all sports. There's some incredibly talented athletes that are out there today. The only thing I would say as a challenge for parents today or for those that have young athletes is to really continue to focus on the big picture of athletics and the importance of athletics are great. It definitely molds you into the person that you'll eventually become because of some of those learnings,
Right.
but also the academic side of it. And, being humble as an athlete, being a teammate, being responsible, I think is so critically important for young athletes today. And I try to imbue that in my children. I think I did a pretty good job of it because I think they understand the importance of that. When I was an athlete, it was something that enabled you to grasp those concepts, I think, quicker than those that were not part of athletics. Those people that weren't part of athletics, obviously, there's other different clubs, if it's fraternities or sororities or drama clubs. And, so there's other ways in which people learn how to be a leader. I can just speak for me that it did definitely help me become a better leader.
I love it.
When I look at the Navy Federal Credit Union team here, I think about the attributes that we hire here, the character and the attitude that we look for in our employees to be part of our team. When I was in college football, when I was on the Blue Angels, that was part of it. It was your character and attitude. Did you fit into that team? Here at Navy Federal Credit Union, we look for that. Do they fit in our culture? Our culture is obviously all about serving our members. Our culture is about engagement. It's about celebrating. We celebrate everything here, milestones, birthdays. We celebrate when teams have success in certain areas, if it's in mortgage lending or at our contact center for call volume. That's our culture. We celebrate because everybody here is a leader at Navy Federal, and we embody that culture. It takes a special person with empathy to understand our military members. So I think that's critical.
And those are the very same elements that you would find on a great sports team.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Serving in the military, being on a football team, that has definitely provided some benefits to me so that I can lead the way that I do today.
Love it. In 2013, I want to go backwards just a little bit to an important last stop in your career. in the Navy. In 2013, you were named commanding officer at the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, becoming the first African-American commanding officer at NAS Pensacola. What did it mean to you to break that barrier? Was it something that you reflected on then, later? What did it mean?
For me personally, I reflected on it much later, probably after I retired. But what I can tell you about that moment is that wasn't at the forefront of my mind when I was selected and when I walked into that role in 2013. What was in the forefront of my mind was it demonstrated that the naval service or military service, whichever service that you're in, it rewards those that work hard, that are dedicated to supporting our nation, defending our nation, and just being a solid leader. And if you demonstrate that in all the roles that you take on while you're in the military, from a young junior officer, working your way up through, ranks and different positions, if it's a flying role or if it's a staff role, where you just jump in head first and work hard, doesn't matter who you are. The military is going to reward you for that. That's what I really felt when I was selected. All the work that I put in, it's paying off. And it probably wasn't until the reporters started to ask me that question that I really put some thought into it. And you could take a look at what's happening in our country now in terms of, Kamala Harris, which is now the first female and African-American vice president of our great country. It shows that it's possible. So as I reflect and I look back on that, Don, I think I was just another role model for that young child that could see me in that position, and it provides them with hope. Everyone owns their destiny. Other people do not own your destiny. I look at this great country that we live in, and there's so many tremendous opportunities for all people that live in this great country. Yes, I did have folks in the past tell me that, hey, maybe you're not going to make it to college because maybe I had 1 or 2 C's in high school. Folks told me that, I don't know if you'll make it in electrical engineering. That's a really hard degree while playing football. Having aspirations to be a pilot one day. It says, well, that's really tough. Flight training is really difficult. When you hear that type of language, for some, it kind of soaks in, whereas you feel that, well, maybe I can't achieve that. And my message to everyone is, first off, you own your destiny. Number 2, don't let anybody put you in a category to say that you have the propensity to result in X, Y, or Z based on some analysis that someone has done on your particular race, ethnicity, or background, or your gender. In our nation right now, we continue to see so many tremendous positive stories of those that break through barriers, that overcome adversity, and they achieve their dream. This is the time. That's what it's all about. Never let anybody tell you otherwise. Take on that challenge. Show the naysayers that you have the capability to succeed and live your dream.
Keith, thank you for being a barrier breaker. Thank you for being open with the sharing of your story. Thank you for being a corporate competitor. We're honored to have had you here today. And I hope that we can continue to grow these conversations through to so many others. The value here was enormous.
Well, thank you so much, Don. It was a pleasure to be here on your podcast. You're a great host, and thank you so much.
As we wrap up our month celebrating military leaders, I want to hone in on a theme that our last 3 guests all mentioned. They developed their own model for leadership. They defined words that best reflected how they want to think of leadership so they could own it. They even had their own acronyms. It's great to read books, articles, and listen to podcasts to get ideas. But to make a change, it takes one last step. Make the lessons your own. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man?
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.